Sending out collection letters, garnishing paychecks, seizing bank accounts, and putting liens on homes and businesses. They call it enforced compliance. And you better watch out because penalties and interest on unpaid taxes compound daily.
Fanatic. This is the NFL Draft Kickoff Special. Andrew DiCecco here. I have you until 10 o'clock. Dallas Goedert. So that's the big talking point in terms of personnel, and it doesn't seem like it's going to be if, but when the Eagles part ways with Dallas Goedert, unless that veteran tight end agrees to a drastic restructure with which it's kind of hard to foresee happening. Now, I'm not of the belief that the Eagles having Dallas Goedert is a luxury. That's not the case at all. I don't care what stats say. I'm not a stats guy. I go with what my eyes tell me. I go with information that I get. And, I mean, your eyes will tell you that Dallas Goedert is a key piece of this Eagles offense. When Nick Sirianni talks about the passing offense and how it runs through three players, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert. Dallas Goedert is a key component here. And beyond that, the Eagles don't have a viable replacement should Dallas Goedert be moved. Grant Calcaterra, he's a nice player, but he's best suited to be a 2. He's miscast as a 1, and for a 17-game season, that can't happen. He's too deficient as a blocker. I like what he gives as a pass catcher, but he's a limited player. E.J. Jenkins, we all know how I feel about E.J. Jenkins. Nice player, good story development, 6'6", 260, can block, former college wide receiver. He's a good developmental player and a probably best suited to be a 3. Of course, they signed Harrison Bryant, and Kylan Granson in free agency. Neither, or maybe one, makes the team. It's hard to bank on that. And for Dallas Goedert, who's done a lot for the Philadelphia Eagles over his career, yes, the big bugaboo with him has been injuries, but when you talk about his blocking prowess, his ability to work the seams and threaten teams vertically, and after the catch, he's just a complete monster. And the Eagles don't win that Saints game, for example, without Dallas Goedert's efforts. And so to think that he can be easily replaced, and that's not the opinion of many, but I'm sure some share that thought. I don't know that that should be the case, and that shouldn't be the thought process, because he's a valuable piece. And when you look at what he brings in terms of run blocking and just his overall skill set, it's not all that common to find around the NFL. And I think that we're sort of coming to the parting of the ways, but we're going to have to wait and see how it goes. But in my opinion, regardless of whether or not Dallas Goedert's on the roster or not, the Eagles have to draft a tight end. This has to be the year. Because I remember doing this show where it was a draft show with my man Bill Colarulo, who you can hear on the Mike Missanelli show from 10 to 2 weekdays. We were talking about, we both thought the Eagles were going to draft a tight end, and it just didn't happen last year. But this has to be the year, and I believe that it will be. We'll talk about that. But first, let's get into the players that the Eagles have lost, and we'll kind of work through that and where some of the deficiencies lie on the roster right now. But we talked about losing guys like Slay and Josh Sweat and Milton Williams and Isaiah Rodgers and Oren Burks. They have a new long snapper now. But we're going to talk about some of the players that they re-signed. They re-signed linebacker Zach Bond. They made it very clear yesterday, the Eagles, that was going to be the priority. Zach Bond was immediately signed. They're keeping their linebacker in place, an all-pro player who's just scratching the surface. Yes, he's 28 years old, but the Eagles viewed him as a special player. Ordinarily, the franchise does not pay linebackers. That's just not something that they have historically done. But they made an exception for Zach Bond due to his growth and development, his impact, his leadership, and his affinity for Philadelphia. It was just a perfect blend. He understands Philadelphia, and Philadelphia accepted him with open arms, and he's been nothing short of spectacular. So he's in the fold, and they also re-signed fullback Ben Van Sumeren, who it's my understanding that Ben is now running full speed after suffering a knee injury back in November during a practice, and his season was over. He's now running at full speed, and I believe he's about a month away. So that's great news there. But he's going to be a fullback now, and that linebacker room's awfully lean, aside from Zach Bond. And, of course, the Kobe Dean's recovering from the torn patellar tendon, which is a gruesome injury. And Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is going into his second season out of Clemson. He was a fifth-round pick last year. But the Eagles think very highly of him, and he's done a remarkable job behind the scenes from everything that I've gathered in terms of just grasping Vic Fangio's defense and earning the trust of the veteran defensive coordinator. And that is huge because Vic isn't just going to play anybody based on merit or anything like that. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is someone who I believe throughout the season you see the high-level football IQ and the instincts. And right now, depending on the status of Nakobe Dean, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. would be in line to start. Again, it's very early, and the offseason doesn't just stop now. There's different waves to this, and the Eagles have proven that they're going to add players, whether it be a Ronald Darby in August or a Steve Nelson in June or May. LeGarrette Blount was a May signing. So this roster is far from a finished product. I don't need to remind you all of that, but that's kind of where they stand right there. But they've signed A.J. Dillon, the running back, formerly of the Green Bay Packers, Josh Uche, the edge rusher with the Kansas City Chiefs, who I mentioned, tight ends Harrison Bryant and Kylan Granson, veteran cornerback Adoree Jackson, who was with the Giants last season, long snapper Charlie Hewlett, he was with the Cleveland Browns, return specialist Avery Williams. That's an interesting player. We're going to bookmark that name because Nick Sirianni had some interesting comments to say about him. He was with the Falcons. Patrick Johnson, former Eagles edge rusher, the Eagles drafted him back in 2021 in the 7th round. Really good story of development. You don't often see 7th-round picks hang on as long as Patrick has, but he's coming back, at least through training camp. He signed a one-year deal as well. Azeez Ojulari, pass rusher, A couple of offensive linemen, offensive tackle Kendall Lamb, who was with the Dolphins, and Matt Pryor, a one-time Eagles draft pick. He was with the Bears last season. And, of course, they had the post-June 1 designation for Darius Slay and James Bradbury, and Brandon Graham, as I'd mentioned, retired. Of course, Saquon Barkley and Lane Johnson were extensions. So there's a lot of holes. There's a lot of holes there. And there's one player in particular in Azeez Ojulari that I'm pretty optimistic about. I know that injuries have been a concern, but 22 career sacks, 24 years old. It wouldn't surprise me if he ends up being that bookend opposite Nolan Smith, but the Eagles still need another edge rusher there to fill out the room. And we all know how I feel about Jaywick Hunt, last year's third-round pick. I think he might make the biggest leap of any defensive player next season on the Eagles, because you saw the growth and the maturation from training camp when he was a raw product out of Houston Christian to all of a sudden he's becoming their third edge rusher and playing meaningful snaps in the Super Bowl. I think the world of Jaywick Hunt, and he may even very well push Azeez Ojulari for a starting job. Josh Uche, though, is the player that I'm a little bit on the fence with it because, well, we'll talk about that. We have plenty more to get into, and I'm going to talk about Josh Uche, and there's another player that I'm kind of on the fence with. We'll talk about it here. Listen to the NFL Draft Kickoff Special right here on 97.5 The Fanatic.
Fanatic Sports Update.
I'm Austin Jones, and this is your Fanatic Sports Update. There's been a bunch of noise about the tush push being banned. Well, Eagles owner Jeffrey Lurie spoke yesterday about the tush push and feels a very specific way about the play potentially being banned.
If this is proven to be less safe for the players, we will be against the tush push. But until that's the case, to me, there'd be no reason to ban this play.
The 76ers have announced that Joel Embiid will undergo arthroscopic surgery on his left knee. Embiid was limited to only 19 games this season. The surgery is set to alleviate the pain that he's been experiencing all year. The Sixers are off tonight and will return to the court tomorrow versus the Bucks at home. You can listen to that game here on 97.5 The Fanatic as tip-off is set for 7 p.m. The Flyers remain off and will return on Saturday where they'll face the Montreal Canadiens. Puck drop is set for 7 p.m. You can listen to that game on our sister station, 93.3 WMMR. Also on Saturday, the Union will face Orlando City. The game is set to start at 7:30, and you can listen to the game on WWDB. I'm Austin Jones on the home of the 76ers and Flyers, 97.5 The Fanatic and 97.5thefanatic.com.
else. I'm saving that for the audience here, and we're going to break it all down and kind of go through it throughout the show. And feel free to reach out with any, not only draft questions, but Eagles questions that you may have. More than happy to answer them. That's what we're here for, 610-632-0975. And you can also check us out on YouTube. As I mentioned, the 97.5 official YouTube channel. Like and subscribe. We're doing some great stuff with the YouTube channel. We have stuff coming out there every single day, and there's a lot of folks that work really hard in putting out and getting this content out there in its best possible form. So definitely check that out. Okay, so there's a couple of different players that the Eagles signed. There's a couple that I'm a little bit higher on, and then there's a couple that I don't know that you can bank on them being a lock to make the team, which kind of leads into some of the weak points on the roster or areas of need, and I kind of prioritize that. But Azeez Ojulari, 24 years old, 22 sacks. Injuries have been his big hiccup, but I think that he does have a level that he can reach. And working with a defensive line coach or an edge rusher coach in Jeremiah Washburn will work wonders in unlocking his potential, in my opinion, because you've seen the flashes, and I think you've seen that a lot of young players, they've all really taken big steps forward working with this coaching staff. And the Eagles do have a remarkable set of assistant coaches that don't get nearly the amount of credit that they should. And Jeremiah Washburn is one of them. Look what he's done with Nolan Smith, and look what he's done with J.O.X. Hunt. So I think Azeez Ojulari, that's the best signing. That's the one that I'm more optimistic about than any of them. And I would also say, if you're really looking at it, Avery Williams. And I mentioned Avery Williams because Nick Sirianni, when he was running through his free agents, he curiously mentioned him and how excited he is to have him in the fold and get him into and all the things that he said that they can do with him, which I thought was interesting because Avery Williams, for those who don't know, was purely a return specialist with the Atlanta Falcons. He was drafted in 2021 out of Boise State. And when I watched Avery Williams at Boise State, I graded him and studied him as a cornerback, which is what he was. A very explosive and fluid athlete, and he was a running back in high school. So when he got to the NFL, the Falcons in 2022 used him as a running back sparingly and as a returner, but he really hasn't been a factor offensively in it aside from that year. So I think if you read between the lines and you hear what Nick Sirianni had to say, it seems to me that Avery Williams is going to be a player that they find creative ways to use. And the Eagles did not, or at least have not to this point, re-signed Britton Covey. He's still out there. And let's not forget, he had the neck injury. That's a question that I get a lot about Britton Covey. Do you think they would bring him back, et cetera? Well, he missed a lot of the season with a neck injury. And until you're cleared for contact, and we don't even know if he is, it's kind of hard to bring him onto a team when his job, and we know he's taken some really vicious hits in his career, and Avery Williams is a more explosive player. So we'll have to wait and see what that brings. But because Nick Sirianni was offered a ringing endorsement for Avery Williams, that's the second player that I'm optimistic about. The two players that I think should not be considered either a lock or a player that's going to have a substantial impact, running back A.J. Dillon. A.J. Dillon has cleared the 600-yard rushing mark in, I believe, 3 of his seasons, which is great from a second running back. And he brings that power element, that physicality. Saquon Barkley also has those same physical traits, and he's that downhill runner. But Saquon obviously can do it all. Saquon's the best in the business. But A.J. Dillon's kind of redundant. Normally, when you replace a starting running back in the lineup for a series or a play or two, it's that you get a change-up runner. And the Eagles drafted a player last year in Will Shipley in the 4th round. And Will obviously is a player who I've got to know quite well. I did my rookie diary series with him where we spoke every week, and we got to know each other. But beyond that, I saw a player who struggled in pass protection in training camp. That's typical for any rookie. But he made it a point to really emphasize that and work on that area. And when I spoke to him at the exit meetings, that was going to be a point of emphasis. He was going to focus on that. And I saw him get stronger. I saw him get more confident and really hone in on things. And he worked with running backs coach Jamal Singleton all year, closely with him. Jamal Singleton is a remarkable coach and does a really nice job of teaching the fundamentals and being a hands-on type of coach. But also he mentioned how instrumental Saquon Barkley and Kenny Gainwell were for his development. So Will Shipley is a player that I believe should be and will be the number 2 running back when the season opens. And I know we have a long way to go, but here we are right now, and I believe that maybe temper your expectations for A.J. Dillon. Let's not forget that he missed a season with a neck injury, and that's not something you want to fool around with. I think in a limited sample size, he could be fine, but Will Shipley gives you more of that dynamic change of pace option, and he can catch the football a little bit better. For Will, it's going to come down to pass protection, and if he can do that, because A.J. Dillon is pretty good in that area. But the other player that didn't do much for me was Josh Uche, the pass rusher who spent half the season with the Patriots and the other half with the Chiefs. You could argue that maybe he wasn't a scheme fit for the Kansas City Chiefs. But still, you have to go all the way back to the 2022 season to find Josh Uche making a big impact. He had 11.5 sacks. But beyond that, it's been very spotty, very sporadic. He doesn't have the length, the prototypical length that you would like from that position. He's 6'1", maybe about 250. He doesn't play the run particularly well, so he's a situational edge rusher. And if he's your 4 and you can keep him healthy, that's not a bad 4. I'm not going to dismiss that, but the recent data that we have to go off of isn't overwhelming. And that's why a player like that shouldn't be considered a slam dunk, especially when, yes, I know Bryce Huff's still in the fold, perhaps a full offseason learning Vic Fangio's defense, and the light comes on. As I've mentioned on these airways before, the Eagles do not believe, they don't think the story's been written on Bryce Huff, so I wouldn't be so quick to write him off. Obviously, he has a long way to go, but for right now, he's on the roster. So that's what we can go off of. And I would expect them to draft an edge rusher. So we talked about tight end, and tight end is a huge need for the Eagles right now. But kind of setting the table here, running through some pressing needs for the Eagles. Defensive tackle. Jalen Carter, of course. Jalen Carter plays pretty much every snap. But then you have Jordan Davis, Moro Ojomo, Thomas Booker, and Gabe Hall. Gabe Hall was a undrafted rookie last year who I've gotten to talk to a little bit here and there. He's about 295. He can play anywhere on the defensive line, and he's a player that spent the entire season on the practice squad. He's going to be given every opportunity to make the roster, but the point is, beyond Jalen Carter, there's questions. Jordan Davis and Moro Ojomo played the same amount of snaps last year, 388, 37%. To ask one of those players to be able to jump up and play 48%, which is exactly what Milton Williams did last season, and Milton Williams, as I mentioned, is with the New England Patriots now. That's a little presumptuous. Moro Ojomo, and I'm pretty bullish on his upside, but he is undersized. And every time Vic Fangio compliments him for being a powerful type of player, he says, for an undersized player. And sometimes when you thrust a player into a more prominent role that is a little bit undersized, you might get diminishing returns. It could limit their effectiveness. And I think he probably would be best as a 3 or a 4 coming in. But the Eagles have a ton of confidence in Moro Ojomo. But still, defensive tackle is a need. Safety. Trading C.J. Gardner-Johnson to the Houston Texans was a left field move that I don't think any of us saw coming, but it left a glaring void at safety. Now, the Eagles do believe in Sidney Brown, who they drafted in the 3rd round a couple of years ago. So they have Reed Blankenship. You can pencil him in as a starter. You can actually write that in pen. But then it's Sidney Brown, Tristan McCollum, Lewis Seen, who they signed late in the season and really just deactivated him for the postseason. They wanted to make sure that he was on the roster and that another team didn't sign him to a futures deal. They wanted to give him the full offseason and an opportunity. And Andre Sam. Andre Sam, I do think the Eagles like quite a bit as a developmental player. But the point being is they're still lean there at safety. Sidney Brown has to learn to play with more restraint. He has more upside and ability to take the football away. We've seen that. In just a limited sample size, he already has 2 career interceptions, but he's a player that he's kind of flies around like a heat-seeking missile. And in Vic Fangio's defense, there is a considerable amount of responsibilities placed on the shoulders of safeties and linebackers. And if you're a player like Sidney Brown and you're kind of volatile, you're a high variance type of player, it's kind of hard to envision Vic Fangio having that amount of trust in a player for 17 games if they're kind of a wild card, if maybe they don't take the best angles to ball carriers. And for every big play they make, they also give up a big play as well. Tristan McCollum is a player that I like quite a bit. I'll talk a little bit about how he may fit into the equation coming up next, but you are listening to the NFL Draft Special right here on 97.5 The Fanatic.
The Philadelphia 76ers.
Sixers win.
.5 The Fanatic. Listen to the NFL Draft Special right here on the station, and You can also check us out on YouTube. A lot of great stuff. A lot of great content on our YouTube channel. Feel free to like and subscribe there. We've been talking a little bit about positions of need before we dive into mock drafts and certain prospects that might be a really good fit for the Eagles, because there's 5 players that I believe would be logical fits at 32 if the Eagles stand pat. Again, we're all operating under the assumption that the Eagles are hanging tight at 32. But I was talking about the safety position and how lean that is right now. And I think as I'm running through it, it resonates a little bit about how light they are in that room. I started to talk about Tristan McCollum, and Tristan McCollum is a player who he was on the field before Sidney Brown last season. And it's kind of curious because Sidney Brown was a 3rd-round pick for the Philadelphia Eagles. But let's not forget that Sidney Brown was on the PUP list to start the season, and he didn't return until October. And for a safety, and I talked about how daunting it can be in processing all the different intricacies that really embody a Vic Fangio defense for that position. It shouldn't really be assumed that you can just pick things up and the learning curve is not going to be steep. I'm sure that contributed to it. Sidney was coming back from an injury, and he ended up being a force on special teams. But Tristan is a player who does not have the same upside as Sidney Brown. I want to make that very clear. But he is a fundamentally sound player, and he plays within the structure of Vic's defense, and he's not a high-variance player. For Vic, you have to picture Vic Fangio and what he expects from that position. He knows that Tristan's going to be lined up where he needs to be. He knows he's going to communicate. He knows he's going to make his tackles in the open field and not fly by a player trying to make a big hit or trying to go for the football. You might not see the same kind of upside. You're not going to, but you're also going to get a coach that has a lot of confidence in putting you out there, knowing that, I kind of have an idea of what this player is all about. So that's my reasoning there with Tristan. But he's probably a 4th safety. He can really help you on special teams. But this is where we're at. And I mentioned Lewis Cine, and Lewis Cine's a player that I've gotten a ton of questions and emails about. Really, really prolific player at the University of Georgia, and somebody who is rangy. He was a high draft pick. I was very bullish on Lewis Cine coming out of the draft, but he struggled with injuries, and he's bounced around a little bit right now. So there's a lot of folks out there that assume that because the Eagles signed him and they stashed him for the postseason to make sure that they're able to kind of develop him and get him immersed in the system, that he's going to make the team. He's going to have to compete just like everybody else. And this is the same player who was released by the Minnesota Vikings last summer. And he spent the vast majority of the 2024 season on the Buffalo Bills practice squad. And because of that, I don't know that you can assume that he's going to be on the roster based on pedigree alone. He's going to have every opportunity just like everybody else. But again, that we're getting to the final depth roles here in that position. Then finally rounding things out is Andre Sam, who spent the season on the practice squad, was really close with C.J. Gardner-Johnson. They trained at the same facility, and Andre came along very well. And he had his own goals every week. I would talk to him in practice, whether that's I need 9 tackles and a forced turnover. And I would check in with him. Like, he tested himself. He didn't get complacent. He found ways to push himself. And I think C.J., having him in his corner really helped get him through the weeks and make sure that he was staying on top of everything. But that's a player who's a little bit older. He was a 25-year-old rookie last year, went to 4 different colleges, and he's gonna have to latch on as a special teams contributor. So that's the safety room. And then finally rounding things out at linebacker, which is another really razor-thin position for the Eagles. Zach Bond, we mentioned. Zach Bond he can be even better next year. Maybe not have the same accolades, but I think in terms of processing and seeing things, seeing the game a certain way, I really do believe that he's going to be somebody that really opens some eyes even more, if you can believe that. But then we have Jeremiah Trotter Jr., again, played only 104 snaps on defense last year, was a key contributor on special teams, highly intelligent player, has to get a little bit stronger, and I assume that he will put the work in to do that in the offseason. And the Eagles think really highly of him, and they should. He's a smart, sharp kid, really good at reading and reacting, and I do believe that he has a promising future. We mentioned Kobe Dean with the injury. We'll have to wait and see what happens there. And Dallas Gant rounds out that room. Dallas Gant was on the practice squad, finished the season on the practice squad. So as you can see, and then Van Sumeren, of course, is no longer a linebacker for the moment. He's a fullback purely. So they're really thin there. So I pose that question to the audience. Where do you feel the Eagles are in most need of addressing with the first-round pick? Because you can make a case for any of those picks, and tight end as well. But I'm curious to hear what you have to say, Austin. Where do you land on that?
Yeah, so with those four options there, D tackle, safety, linebacker, and tight end, I'd have to look at defensive tackle just because of you kind of scared me there when you gave me the snap count for Davis there and Ojomo, the fact that they were essentially at the same amount of snaps, even though Jordan Davis has been a pro just a little bit longer, and the fact that I thought he kind of was going to turn a corner. So the fact that, you have them two at the same amount of snaps makes me a little hesitant to go anywhere else besides the defensive tackle position.
Yeah, that's sound logic. Look, I in my initial mock drafts, I've had Walter Nolan, the defensive tackle from Ole Miss, going at 32. And there were some that were like, why would the Eagles go for a defensive tackle when they needed this, that, and that? Well, look at the organizational value that they place on the trenches, for one. And two, when you really look beyond Jalen Carter, there's a lot of questions there. Moten Williams ate up a ton of snaps, 48%, as I'd mentioned, and they don't have a lot there. Jordan Davis, a good complementary player, really more of a one-dimensional player who really flashed late in the season, showed off some pass rush chops, but I don't know that he can play more than 45% of the snaps. So it's kind of unrealistic based on the data that we have to assume that he will play and be able to be on par for what Milton Williams gave you last year. And then Moro Ojomo, I mentioned him being undersized, having that motor and that burst, and being that interior disruptor. And believe me, he was. In training camp, he wrecked every practice. I was there at every practice. But it's tough to project how that's going to play out for an entire season. Sometimes you get worn down as an undersized player, and all of a sudden you don't have that same upfield burst and the same qualities that made him such an appealing player to Vic Fangio, and sometimes you make yourself a liability. So I don't know that you can go into the season banking on that, which is why I believe, I'm with you, Austin, that defensive tackle should be a priority.
Now, would you say that Walter Nolan would fit the D tackle type that Vic Fangio would want? Because I've been hearing you in and out through the course, past couple of weeks. It doesn't seem like they'll want another run stopper type of D tackle, even though Jordan Davis, his future is in question a little bit with this contract and the fifth-year option. So do they look more of trying to get another guy to replace him down the line, or do they want another power speed rusher type at D tackle?
I think in a perfect world, a power speed rusher type of tackle. And Walter Nolan does actually remind me quite a bit of Milton Williams and some of his traits. But I'm going to talk now. We're going to unveil the first round pick of the mock draft and kind of work our way through that coming up next. It may surprise you what I have on tap for the Eagles. You're listening to the NFL Draft Special right here on 97.5 The Fanatic.
Fanatic Sports Update.
About the play being potentially banned.
If this is proven to be less safe for the players, we will be against the tush push. But until that's the case, to me, there'd be no reason to ban this play.
Jeffrey Loyer wants to see the stats. Now, the 76ers have a new stat that Joel Embiid will undergo arthroscopic surgery on his left knee next week. Embiid's been limited to 19 games this season. This surgery is set to alleviate the pain that Embiid has been feeling in that knee. The Sixers are off tonight and will return to the court tomorrow versus the Bucks at home. You can listen to the game here on 97.5 The Fanatic as tip-off is set for 7 p.m. And the Flyers remain off, and they'll return on Saturday where they'll face the Montreal Canadiens. Puck drop is set for 7 p.m. You can listen to that game here on our sister station 93.3 WMMR. Also on Saturday, the Union will face Orlando City. The game is set to start at 7:30. You can listen to the game on WWDB. I'm Austin Jones on the home of the 76ers and Flyers, 97.5 The Fanatic and 97.5thefanatic.com.
Draft Special. You can also hear us on YouTube on the 97.5 The Fanatic official YouTube channel. But before we get to the first round pick that I have here, try Rita's new Skittles Ice and Skittles Pop Topping here for a limited time. I got to tell you, over the week, we had it here at the station. Me, Tyrone, and Silvana and Austin was here as well, and we really housed the carton of that Skittles water ice. It was phenomenal. It honestly was. I liked it so much, Austin, that over the weekend I went to my local Rita's, and I had to track down some, and I had to get that gelati. One of the best I've had in quite some time.
It's good, man. The spring is springing, so you got to stop by Rita's and get that nice water ice. I had the Sour Patch that day. It was
heck yeah. That's awesome. Yeah,
beautiful.
Look, you can't go wrong with Rita's, and this is the time of the year where, they pull out all the stops. They have all the flavors, and I definitely have too much Rita's water ice during the season, but good stuff there. So my first round pick, it may surprise some because in the past 2 mock drafts that I've done, I've had defensive tackle Walter Nolan from Ole Miss because of how glaring of a void it is, as Austin and I just talked about. But I have him going with tight end Mason Taylor from LSU. You heard the comments from Nick Sirianni yesterday. That all, for me at least, told me that the Eagles probably they're going to be parting ways with Dallas Goedert at some point. And I don't know that you want to wait till the second or the third round to add a player. Why wait to add a Harold Fannin Jr. from Bowling Green in the second round, or a Terrence Ferguson from Oregon in the third round, or an Elijah Arroyo from Miami in the third round, when you can get the best, in my opinion, the best in the whole draft in Mason Taylor? And sources have told me that he's expected, multiple sources indicated that he's going to be a late first-round pick. Most likely, he's coming off the board on Thursday, and it's my understanding that the Eagles have shown some interest as well. So that's a player that I like as a fit. Now, if you're looking for a comp, and I know that a lot of folks like to visualize a certain player and what they would be getting if the Eagles do draft that player, and for me, it's Zach Ertz. He reminds me a lot of Zach Ertz. I like his ability to find the soft spot in zone. He's a really good route runner, soft hands, strong hands, and I just think he's a very fluid player that if you look at LSU, I don't believe that they used Mason Taylor to the best of his ability. I think that when you have a receiver like a Brian Thomas and you have Malik Neighbors there, I mean, there's a lot of players. There's only one football, and it's tough to be able to force feed any one player, especially when you have all-world talents at wideout. But I think Mason Taylor has a lot more to offer than what we've even seen at LSU. Just a tremendously gifted receiver. He leaves a little bit to be desired as a blocker, but he's a work in progress there. I think that he'll be able to work that out. Regardless of whether or not Dallas Goedert is on the roster, and right now I'm operating under the assumption that he won't, the Eagles have to address tight end. They have to. They don't have enough there, even as a successor. So at worst, they have to get a player that they can groom for a year, learning under Goddard. I mean, that to me is the only course of action. And as I sort of move through this, you'll see that if the board falls that way, you could definitely see the Eagles going that route. And again, I talked about there's interest there, and there should be. Any of the top players at that position, which is a position of need for the Eagles, should be a position that the team has interest in, or a player that the team has interest in. But a little bit more background. He's the son of Dolphins legend and Pro Football Hall of Famer Jason Taylor, and his uncle's Zach Thomas. He's also related to Joy Taylor. So, look, there's a lot of celebrities there in that family, and I really do believe that Mason Taylor is the best tight end in this draft, and one that I believe will help Jalen Hurts, being that security blanket over the middle of the field, and help take that offense to another level. What do you got, Austin?
You surprised me. I did not think you were going to go tight end, but your logic behind it makes perfect sense why wait in the second half of the draft for a potential replacement for Goddard if, you have this potential talent here from LSU. I do like that. It seems to be that SEC can produce some talented pass catchers, and the fact that he comes from, NFL loyalty. Your dad is a Pro Football Hall of Famer. Your uncle is Zach. He's a Pro Football Hall of Famer as well. So, right. You surprised me because we have been talking about D tackles and outside linebackers, but the fact that you're like, no, let's not wait. I think it is kind of smart too because, you get a younger tight end to start coming into this offense. By the time he's probably really starting to, quote, hit his prime, maybe one of the receivers or someone else from that offense that is part of that core has to move on due to their contracts, because we've talked about that on air as well. So I like that pick a lot.
Yeah, and look, even Austin doesn't know which direction I'm going to go. I created this mock draft for this purpose, for this show, and as you get more information and as you listen to Nick Sirianni, it's going to change the way that you approach the draft, and you try to put your Howie Roseman hat on. You try to view things realistically through the lens of the Philadelphia Eagles, as I always pride myself in doing. And right now, I really do believe that if you see a player like that at 32, and the Eagles are sitting in a really good spot at 32, assuming they stay there, because they could have an edge rusher that could fall there, a couple of good offensive linemen. In my opinion, the best tight end in the draft. You can argue that Colston Loveland is another player that, you could argue. But I really do think that Mason Taylor would be a tremendous fit for the Philadelphia Eagles, and one that I think that Jalen Hurts would absolutely love. But I do want to remind everyone that you're listening to WPEN and WPEN HD1 Burlington, Philadelphia, a Beasley Media Group station, broadcasting live from the Comcast Business Studios, powering possibilities. There are other tight ends in this draft that would be fits for the Eagles, but if you have a chance to get the best one that I believe will have the easiest learning curve in acclimating to the NFL, I think you have to do it. And you'll kind of see the way that I envision the board falling. I think that would make a lot of sense. Harold Fannin Jr. with Bowling Green, went to Bowling Green. There's a connection there with Scott Leffler, the Eagles quarterbacks coach, so they know him very well. He would be, if the Eagles were to take one in the second round, he would be a really good fit there. And then the third round, the player that I've been mocking to the Eagles in both of my previous mock drafts that have been in print was Terrence Ferguson from Oregon. 6'5", 250. He ran the fastest 40 time at the Combine. I think that he is an intriguing player, but I have mentioned this really since January, since even December, that I was really, really high on Mason Taylor. And if the Eagles get anything close to what Zach Ertz gave the Philadelphia Eagles in Mason Taylor, they're going to be just fine. And he would complement A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith quite well. And for Jalen Hurts, and really for any quarterback, you have to get a tight end that can be that security blanket and alleviate some pressure, that you can get those quick hitters out to him and allow him to make plays on the move. It's especially critical in this offense, and I do believe that it has to be an immediate need. Austin, who would be your first-round selection for the Eagles?
So, as we have been talking about, I was more or less going with the defensive end outside linebacker position. When I was on with Connor over the weekend, I went with, I hope I'm saying it right because it's a little different spelling, but Mikael Williams, outside linebacker, defensive end, Georgia. Well, he's from Georgia, so he fits that mold. I know not every player on the defense can be from Georgia, but why not have half of them that have some type of continuity playing with the guys that are already on the Eagles team? He's versatile, so he can play down in the 4 technique, or he can stand up, be an edge rusher, just like how you have Nolan Smith and sometimes Josh Sweat stand up as well. He's played in the rotation down there, so he knows that he's not going to have to be relied on, at least as a rookie, to play, 1,000 snaps like guys have done in the past. And then, I've also liked the fact that, he had 2 sacks in the playoffs against Texas. He's also had 5 quarterback pressures. So I think that he has the intangibles to be what the Eagles need on the outside edge.
So you hear where Austin and I are going with each of our first-round picks. He's going with Mikael Williams from Georgia, and I said Mason Taylor, the tight end from LSU. But let's take a look at the edge rusher group right now, as currently constituted for the Philadelphia Eagles. Nolan Smith, recovering from a torn triceps that he suffered in the Super Bowl. I think Nolan Smith is poised for stardom. I really do. And I'm not sure where a lot of folks land on that, but I believe that he can be an 11 or 12 sack a year player. And Azeez Ojulari, the free agent signing, if he can give you 8 or 9 sacks, which if he can stay healthy would be tremendous. That'd be really good value for the Eagles. But Jalix Hunt is a player that I really do believe is about to come into his own and about to become a household name because of the drastic development that you saw take shape throughout the season and the body type. He got stronger. His pass rush approach got a lot better. He was setting the edge. He was playing with an attitude. And the more snaps that he got, the more confidence he played with. And that is the case with most young players. And again, I also like to throw this out there. In the NFL draft, players progress at different rates. Nolan Smith played 16% of the snaps as a rookie. It doesn't mean they can't play. You have to allow players the time and the opportunity to grow, develop, and mature. You could get a rookie that all of a sudden they hit the ground running week one, like Quinyon Mitchell. But more often than not, it takes time. So you have to afford players the time to grow into their role. And if there is an edge rusher there at 32, for me, it would be Boston College's Donovan Ezeraku. 16.5 sacks last year, 20.5 tackles for loss, about 6'2", 250. So you probably would like to see him get a little bit stronger and build up his play strength. But his bend and his fluidity, he has very long arms. He fits the mold of what the Eagles typically look for at the position. And I know there's interest there. For me, it seems like I said, Mason Taylor, but it feels like Donovan Ezeraku has Philadelphia Eagles written all over him. I could see them going for that. They prioritize the trenches. And I think adding an edge rusher in the first round, a young edge rusher, they're afforded the luxury of not having to be thrown into the fire early. They can grow and they can develop. And I think that would be the best course because you already have a number of players in front of them. And maybe Josh Uche does pan out, and you have this rookie waiting in the wings learning under them. What do you think about that, Austin? You like Donovan Ezeraku at all?
I am not going to say I'm too familiar with this game, but I trust your opinion on it. The fact that you said that, he has the potential of being, someone that could maybe be a star for this Eagles team. And the fact that he's written with an Eagles green marker already has me a little excited back here. I'm looking forward to deep diving into a little bit more. It sounds like you're still going with Mason, but you wouldn't be surprised if they went with him either.
Yeah, I'm sticking with Mason Taylor. I have to. But there's a couple of other players along the offensive line, and I'll explain my reasoning, that I highlighted as being really good fits for the Philadelphia Eagles. Getting them to Stoutland University and having them maybe marinate for a year or two, having them being able to be plugged right in, and the offense wouldn't miss a beat is awfully tempting. I'll tell you all about it coming up. You're listening to the NFL Draft Special right here on 97.5 The Fanatic.
We want to hear from you, so text us.
5 The Fanatic. Andrew DiCecco here. I have you until 10 o'clock. You're listening to the NFL Draft Special. You can also catch us on our 97.5 The Fanatic YouTube channel. Feel free to like and subscribe. We have a lot of great content on there, and like I said, there are a lot of folks who are putting in some great work in making sure that the channel is all that it can be. And I mentioned Rita's earlier, but I got to introduce Rita's new Skittles Ice. Try it in a gelati, which I did on Saturday, or ice blender, and add Rita's new Skittles pop topping for extra fun. Yeah, make sure you do that. Hopefully I'm convincing. Hopefully I'm convincing enough in Austin where we give you all the ringing endorsements that you need there. And me, Ty, and Silvano were raving about it the other day on the show. Definitely don't miss out on that. But there's a couple of offensive linemen that I alluded to that would be potential fits at 32. And initially, you're probably thinking the Eagles already have the best offensive line in the NFL. They're good. Lane Johnson signed an extension. We're good. Signed through 2027. Well, I feel like that might be a year-to-year thing. And right now, Lane says he feels good physically, but you just never know. And eventually, regardless, like I talked about with Dallas Goedert, it would serve the Eagles well to identify a replacement for Lane Johnson so that when the torch does need to be passed, the player's ready to step in and the offense goes on without a hitch. So, Ariante Ursary is a mammoth offensive tackle from Minnesota, one of my favorite late first-round prospects. He moves well. He's powerful. What I like about him most is that he plays with a mean streak. He is a nasty player and a finisher. But you like his dimensions, and I do believe that working on some of his overall refinement is going to be the best. If he landed in Philadelphia, that would be the best case for him because you're going to go to Stoutland University, you're going to get a great education, you're going to learn with the best offensive lineman in the NFL, and then all of a sudden when it's your time, you're going to be ready to go. Another player, guard/tackle, Donovan Jackson from Ohio State. The Eagles do like him a little bit as well. And that one for me is a hard sell because I personally believe that Tyler Steen is a good enough player. I believe he is serviceable. And say what you will, I don't think that there was that big of a drop-off from Mekhi Becton to Tyler Steen. Sure, he had some penalties, and I know that when he was inserted in the Super Bowl for a little bit, he gave up a pressure. A lot of people have written me that. But the point is, well, one, he was going against Chris Jones. But more often than not, when he was thrown in the middle of a game, which is also not an easy task for any player, I think he acquitted himself well. If you want to find a game and go back and watch that I think best captures what Tyler Steen is all about and what he can do, go back and look at that Saints game where he had to come in. And I thought he did a really nice job. If you have a right guard already and Tyler Steen, I think that you kind of just roll with him. You've already invested 2 years in him. He moves pretty well. He moves better than Mekhi Becton. You also have Kenyon Green, a first-round pick of the Texans a few years ago that hasn't yet panned out. He's a young player, but I also don't think that you can sort of just assume that an admittance to Stoutland University is going to clear up all of his blemishes. That's going to have him back on the right course, and he's going to be the new reclamation project like Mekhi Becton was. But if you're an offensive line when you have an offensive line that already has all-world talent with 4 players, you can kind of mask the deficiencies or any shortcomings that another player may have. That happened last year with Becton. Though Becton played very well, but there were times where he would get beat. Certainly more often than any of his counterparts. But I think Steen would be just fine. So it's kind of hard for me to believe or really get behind the Eagles taking a guard/tackle there in Donovan Jackson. Though he is coming from a winning program, he has the pedigree, and he would be an immediate starter. I should mention that. That's a plug and play. But still, that to me is a hard sell. Another player who I mentioned, and I want to go back and talk a little bit more about him, is Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College. When I look at 5 players that I believe would be perfect fits for the Eagles at 32, he's one of them. 16 and a half sacks, 20 tackles for loss, was all over the field for Boston College last year. He's a Williamstown, New Jersey native, by the way. And he has the...
Essentially my neighbor, not to interrupt you.
Oh, that's good. Oh, look.
Essentially my neighbor. That's crazy. I did not know that.
He's a hometown legend then for you. Yeah, he's got the bend and the fluidity and the length that it kind of encapsulates what the Eagles look for at that position. So I think that Donovan Ezeraku would be a good fit, and then rounding things out is Walter Nolan. Walter Nolan, in my opinion, can go anywhere from the middle of the first round all the way to the end. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that he would be available when the Eagles are on the clock. And defensive tackle is a huge void. A huge void. We talked about the need to replace the snaps that Milton Williams took on last year. 48%, second in command behind Jalen Carter. They don't have anybody that you can write in pen or assume that they're going to be able to take on that kind of a sizable role, that kind of responsibility. You think that Moro Ojomo can do it, but we don't know that. You have to give yourself some insurance there. And if you have a chance to add a player like Walter Nolan, who can be an interior force and add pressure from the interior of that defensive line and reap the benefits of playing alongside someone like Jalen Carter, well, I think you have to consider it. If the opportunity is there, I would expect the Eagles to pounce. Given their organizational value that they place on the trenches, it would just make almost too much sense. But Mason Taylor, for me, at 32, is probably the best alternative for the Eagles. And you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about as I start to move through the draft. And that's to me, that's the best player at his position, in my opinion. And if the Eagles have a chance to get him at 32, I think you have to, versus taking maybe the second or third best player at another position. If they're truly adopting the best player available approach, if the board falls the way that it may and the way that sources have indicated that he's going to be a Thursday player, well, that could be Mason Taylor. But the second round pick is coming up, and I have a feeling that a lot of folks are going to like that one. This is the NFL Draft Special right here on 97.5 The Fanatic.
Fanatic Sports Update.
I'm Austin Jones, and this is your Fanatic Sports Update. There's been a bunch of noise about the tush push being banned this offseason. Eagles owner Jeffrey Lurie spoke to the media yesterday about the tush push and feels a very specific way about the play potentially being banned.
If this is proven to be less safe for the players, we will be against the tush push. But until that's the case, to me, there'd be no reason to ban this play.
Show Jeffrey the stats. Now, the 76ers have announced that Joel Embiid will undergo arthroscopic surgery on his left knee next week. Embiid's been limited to 19 games this year. This surgery is set to alleviate the pain that Embiid has been dealing with all year round. Now, the Sixers are off tonight, and they'll return to the court tomorrow versus the Bucks at home. You can listen to that game here on 97.5 The Fanatic. Tip-off is set for 7 o'clock. The Flyers remain off as well, and they will return on Saturday, where they face the Montreal Canadiens. Puck drop is set for 7 p.m. You can listen to that game here you can listen to the game on our sister station, 93.3 WMMR. Also on Saturday, the Union face Orlando City. The game is set to start at 7:30, and you can listen to the game on WWDB. I'm Austin Jones on the home of the 76ers and Flyers, 97.5 The Fanatic and 97.5thefanatic.com.
97.5 The Fanatic. Andrew DiCecco here. I have you until 10 o'clock. This is the NFL Draft Special. Having some fun here with my man Austin Jones. Love that bounce back music. That's Philadelphia's own Heaven's Edge. My guys, Mark and Reggie and Jaron and all those guys. They're very supportive and they listen to everything that I do. So I appreciate them. But I want to tell you about our Fanatic signing bonus cash contest. 97.5 The Fanatic and Live Casino and Hotel Philadelphia present the Fanatic signing bonus. Your shot to win $1,000 5 times a day. Weekdays beginning this Monday, April 7th, listening at 8 a.m., 10 a.m., 12 noon, 3 p.m., and 5 p.m. Each time, we'll announce a keyword. You have until 25 minutes after the hour to enter it. There are 3 ways to do so. On the contest page at 975thefanatic.com, via the Fanatic app on your mobile device, or text it to the special short code 45911. One winner gets $1,000. Sponsored by Live Casino and Hotel Philadelphia. Contest rules at 975thefanatic.com. So there's another position that I don't know that we can rule out in the first round. And I'll get to my second round pick in a moment. But Nick Sirianni said something kind of curious. And I mentioned this to Tyrone during the break because it caught my attention. He was asked about Keely Ringo, and he had somewhat of a lukewarm response. Let's hear what Nick had to say.
We'll see here. A lot of time, he's continued to get better. A lot has to happen before even next year. Like we play a game, we'll have OTAs, we'll have training camp, and there's a lot of time before we play a game. So all these guys just continue to develop. That's our job as coaches is to develop players, put them in positions to succeed, and then develop them, with their fundamentals, in the weight room, just continue to get them better. So we have a lot of time before that happens.
So that was Nick Sirianni talking about Keely Ringo, who's now entering his 3rd season with the Philadelphia Eagles. And I know that there's a lot of folks that are excited about Keely Ringo, and I understand why. He's immensely athletic. He's 6'2", 200 pounds. You saw what he did at Georgia, and he's young. He's younger than Quinyon Mitchell. But he played just 11% of the defensive snaps last year, and now he's going to be challenging with Adoree Jackson, who's a veteran, for, at least right now, the cornerback spot opposite Quinyon Mitchell. Because if you listen to Nick Sirianni yesterday, it sounds like he's intent on keeping Cooper DeJean inside at nickel, and it's hard to argue against it. Cooper DeJean's already one of the best players at his position, and it's arguably, in my opinion, the hardest position to play on defense. So with that, I would not rule out the possibility of the Eagles drafting a corner at 32 if that's truly the best player available. Now, there's 2 names to keep an eye on. Maxwell Hairston from Kentucky, about 5'11", 185, ran a 4.2 at the NFL Scouting Combine. I love the way that he reads the eyes of quarterbacks and breaks on footballs, and his fluidity, his ability to flip his hips and run with the full gamut of wide receivers, no matter what shape and size. In fact, I believe the Eagles even brought him in for a visit. So there's interest there. And look, the Eagles are going to do their due diligence on pretty much every high-end player that's supposed to be or could be available around that area. And they prioritize corner, much like they do the trenches, so you can't rule it out. But there's also another player who I like even more, named Siobhan Revel from East Carolina. I love his competitiveness. He has really good size. He would be the prototypical corner that I would expect the Eagles to go for. And when I look at how that back end of the first round might unfold, there are 2 teams that I'm looking at that could be in the running for Siobhan Revel. The Philadelphia Eagles and the Kansas City Chiefs. 2 teams that adopt the best player available approach. And for Howie Roseman, who's knocked it out of the park the last 4 years with the draft, because they're not reaching for players, they're letting the board come to them, and he maneuvers it masterfully. It wouldn't surprise me if they go that route. Especially when you hear the comments made about Keely Ringo that he wasn't especially bullish or optimistic, it didn't sound like. And I understand that it's early in the process. It's very early. But that's what we have to go off of right now. And you also have to look at the fact that he didn't contribute much on defense last year. I mean, he played 11% of the snaps. Isaiah Rodgers leapfrogged him in training camp. They were going head-to-head for a while. They were switching days, working with the first-team defense opposite Slay. But eventually it was Quinyon Mitchell who, of course, took the reins there in Week 1 in Brazil. But Isaiah Rodgers had the better summer over Kelee Ringo. Eventually, he was getting those first-team reps, and it wasn't Kelee Ringo anymore. For as athletic as he is, and especially the straight-line speed, he tends to get a little bit grabby, and you wonder how that's going to project over the full sample size, the full slate of games. It could leave him vulnerable, and teams could look to attack him in the air to see if they're able to get a free one. So corner should not be discounted as being a possibility. But looking at the second-round pick number 64, I have the Eagles going with, from the University of Texas, safety Andrew Makuba, one of my favorite defensive players in this draft class. Highly, highly intelligent, maybe the smartest defensive player in this class. And at 5'11", 190, yeah, he's a little bit undersized. He's smaller for that position. He could stand to add 5 more pounds and get a little bit stronger. But when you look at what the Eagles look for at that position, especially for a Vic Fangio defense, the intelligence, the versatility, the ability to have that multi-alignment versatility, but I think it's his ability to take the football away that's almost as intriguing as that. He had 5 interceptions last year for the Longhorns. And I just view his versatility as a valuable element to his game. You couple that with the football instincts and the high-level IQ, and to me, that seems like a player that Vic Fangio would absolutely love to have in his defense. And we went over the safety room. Sidney Brown, Reed Blankenship, Tristan McCollum, Lewis Seen, Andre Sam. They need a safety, so why wait? And that's right around. That's not a reach at all. That's exactly where myself and a lot of folks have Andrew Makuba slotted. Now, if they were to trade up for a player in the first round, there is a safety that I could see as a viable option, and that's Malachi Starks from Georgia. And Starks has obviously familiarity with a lot of players on that Eagles defense. He's around the football an awful lot, and he would give you that big play production, those ball skills that the Eagles lost when they shipped C.J. Gardner-Johnson to Houston. Still, though, it's hard to envision the Eagles trading up for a safety. That's just not a position that they traditionally hold in the highest of value, especially in the first round. So in the second round, Andrew Makuba is a pretty good consolation and a plug-and-play. And you pair a Makuba and a Blankenship safety tandem, that's pretty good. Alongside Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, and we'll see which route they go, whether it's Kelee Ringo or Dory Jackson, or maybe they draft a corner and they really take to the position as quickly as Quinyon Mitchell did. Who knows? But you can't rule it out. But I believe that you're starting to see the Eagles prioritize developing younger players and putting them in position to be successful and allowing them to work through challenges. I think that would be a really good pairing. So I have Mason Taylor, the tight end from LSU, at pick number 32, and then pick 64, they address the safety position and take Andrew Makuba from the University of Texas. What do you have them doing at 64 there, Austin?
Yeah, so I actually like that draft pick a lot in Makuba, just looking over his combine stats. I mean, if you're going to tell me they'll have a safety that can run a 4.45, you can sign me up with it, because the receivers coming out on the opposite end are running anywhere from a 4.2 to a 4.5, at least in today's NFL. So I like that a lot. I feel that they would probably target the defensive backfield the same. Not too sure if they would rather go corner or safety, because you did allude to the skepticism that I guess Sirianni has for Kelee Ringo.
Certainly sounded that way. Yeah.
It's not the most confident soundbite that we've heard from Nick Sirianni. So I do like the move in general to the defensive backfield, whether that is safety or corner. Now, for your man here, would he look to be more of a strong safety or a free safety with the Eagles?
Free.
Gotcha.
That would be really good. And if they are looking at a corner in that draft slot, a player like Benjamin Morrison would be a really good fit there from Notre Dame. And that is that's something that you can't overlook either. But I think that there is a lot more questions, at least on paper. You can argue safety or corner. We're splitting hairs. But I do believe that safety has a lot more questions there. Because really, Reed Blankenship, in my opinion, he is a starting safety, don't get me wrong. But he's best suited to be a complementary piece, a Robin to someone else's Batman. He was at his best when he was playing opposite C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Teams aren't able to key in on him. He's able to play a little bit more freely and can kind of go find the football. And he is good at taking away the football. But I think for him to be your top safety is miscasting Reed Blankenship greatly. But Tyrone Johnson and I got into some really good conversation on Monday when I filled in for Ricky Batalco on the Best Show Ever, and we were kind of going through some of the different mock drafts, and Ty was laying it out, and I was reacting to that, and we're going to play for you that, and I'm curious to hear where some of you land on that. You can get involved in that conversation at 610-632-0975. The NFL Draft Special right here on 97.5 The Fanatic and on YouTube continues.
Andrew Salciunas.
A play is so dominant that they
Fanatic. This is the Birds Insider Draft Special. Andrew DiCecco here. I have you until 10 o'clock. Having some fun here on a Wednesday night with my man Austin Jones, talking all things Eagles draft related. And we started to work our way through my mock draft that I crafted for this show, solely for this purpose, and it's not released anywhere else. And a lot of it is based off of what I was able to gather from hearing Nick Sirianni speak, Jeffrey Lurie, and Howie Roseman from the NFL owners' meetings. And it's going to be really interesting to see. And Tyrone and I, on Monday on the Best Show Ever, we talked a little bit about some of the different it's a mock draft compilation that's out there from a national perspective, and I reacted to it, and here's what we had to say.
Right here, Dave Zangaro from NBC Sports Philadelphia. He looks at some of these mock draft trade options, and then ESPN presented one as well. So, Andrew DiCecco, you happen to do a tremendous job covering the Eagles. You're our own Birds insider, so I want your reaction to some of these scenarios that are Dave Zangaro compiled and he gave his opinion on. The first one, this is from a guy from NFL.com. He has them going from 32 up to 24 to draft Malachi Starks from Georgia. What do you think about that scenario?
Well, I really like the player, but I don't know if that's a position that the Eagles traditionally value, so you have to figure out what it would cost for the Eagles to move from 32 to 24.
He's saying pick 96, the third-round pick is what they would need to part with.
Yeah, see, I don't like that. You're missing out on too much talent, especially when you have too many holes to fill on the roster. Mm-hmm. I like Malachi Starks. If he falls within striking distance, it would be awfully tempting. But if you can get someone like an Andrew Makuba, the safety from Texas, who could be available probably at 64 when the Eagles are next on the clock, and I think he would actually fit Vic Fangio's system quite well. Starks is the best at his position, but I think you can get comparable talent later and still preserve that third-round pick.
Yeah, last year the Lions went from 29 to 24 to get penalty-ridden Terrion Arnold.
Yeah.
They gave up pick 73 to Dallas, and they got a seventh-rounder in this year's draft. So that's where pick 96 is projected. All right, here's a guy from USA Today. He has them trading out of the first round, the Giants trading in to draft Jackson Dart, and the Eagles getting an additional pick. They would move from 32 to 34, and then they would get an additional third-round pick in that scenario to move down 2 spots, but out of the first round. What would you think about that?
That I could see them doing. And it would be a Howie Roseman type of move, and I don't expect them to stand pat at 32, to be clear. I think that they're either going to move up or move down. In this scenario, to move down just 2 spots and pick up another pick, there is so much talent that's going to be there in that third round. Mm-hmm. And if you're the Eagles, you talk about the youth movement and everything like that and fulfilling the roster, it would make a lot of sense. That's where they could get a tight end, perhaps.
CBS Sports also has them trading out. Okay, he has them picking up. They would go from 32 to 36 and pick up pick 107. So that would be to move up 4 spots with Jacksonville. So they would get an extra 4th-round pick in that scenario. And then Jacksonville would take Ibuka, the good wide receiver from Ohio State.
That would be all right. I mean, in the 4th round, if they add that pick, that's where you can get an offensive lineman like a Chase Lunt from UConn, who's 6'7", would be a good developmental player, could be that swing tackle for the future, an eventual successor for Lane Johnson. That could be where you add maybe a linebacker. We know the Eagles aren't going to draft one high.
But
however,
they need bodies.
In the 4th round, that would be a good spot to do so. That would make a lot of sense.
Charles Davis from NFL.com has them taking the safety from South Carolina. Just staying there at 32 and doing that.
Yeah, see, I was enamored with Nick Emenwari's workout from South Carolina.
It was impressive.
6'3", 220. He reminds me a lot of Cam Chancellor, and I'm not so sure that a Cam Chancellor type of player is what Vic Fangio looks for in his safeties.
Now, real fast for people to talk about the workout, he ran a 4.38 at 220 pounds, 4.38 40, 43-inch vertical leap, and 11.6 broad jump, all top of his position.
Tested
in
off the
all
charts.
of those spots.
Off the charts. That being said, he is not a movable chess piece. He doesn't have that versatility, and his skill set somewhat, obviously there's a lot more athleticism, but it's redundant to some of the players that they already have on the roster, like a Reed Blankenship and a Sidney Brown, in that he's better suited to be a box safety, and I think what they need is a more rangy back-end player, which is where someone like a Malachi Starks or a Xavier Watts from Notre Dame or Andrew Bakuba, who I mentioned from Texas, would probably fit that defense best.
All right. CBS Sports has another one here. Just staying at 32 overall, taking Tyler Booker, the guard from Alabama. I can vouch that he was a good football player in college.
Oh, yeah. He's a good football player. Donovan Jackson, another guard, he's slash tackle from Ohio State, would make a lot of sense at 32 as well. But I don't know if you could go there, Ty, because the Eagles already have a player who's serviceable in Tyler Steen.
Right.
Do you really need to add another guard to that in the first round?
In the first round, you probably don't. You could probably get a person who could. He would end up being a starter, I guess.
Yeah.
But Steen is. Here's the thing: we know more about Steen than we know about Ringo, and we know more about Steen than we knew Sidney Brown. So if I had to pick what spot, if I want to draft a guy who may start, I would more likely feel more comfortable going corner or safety there, me personally, than guard.
And I'm glad
or tackle,
right?
Because Lane's not going to play forever. That maybe can play guard for now and replace Lane Johnson. I'll be more comfortable with those three spots over taking just a natural guard.
And I'm glad you mentioned corner, because nobody really considers that, considering the Eagles already have Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean.
But I don't know if Ringo can play.
Right, and there's a couple of players who fit right within that range, and Maxwell Harrison from Kentucky. Siobhan Revel's a player that I have highlighted as a player who I look at the Chiefs and I look at the Eagles as two teams that could be realistic possibilities for him. And the Eagles, they like to stockpile young defensive backs. That would make a lot of sense, too.
All right, the next one, we only got a couple more. From Yahoo Sports. Josh Connerly, the tackle from Georgia. He played left tackle, but they did play him on the right side. Apparently, he wanted to show versatility at the Senior Bowl. They said the only knock is his frame's going to have to add weight. He's 6'5", 311, which makes some people question whether or not he can kick in and play guard because he's not that big.
Yeah, I don't know that he can play guard, but I do view him as a right tackle in the future.
Be really good.
I like him a lot. I think that he's probably a top of the second round type of player. The Eagles like him. They brought him
32nd, that wouldn't be
that wouldn't be a
stretch.
reach. No, the Eagles brought him in for a 30 visit. There's another player I like, Ariante Ursley from Minnesota. He's a mammoth offensive tackle. That would be a player that you enroll him at Stoughton University for a couple of years, and then he's ready to take the reins when eventually Lane Johnson moves on.
Yeah, and it's better, everybody says, better to get a tackle before you need one in this league than wait until you need one.
And the Eagles are always ahead of the curve in that thought process, so it wouldn't surprise me if they take a tackle early and then start to let him grow and develop under Jeff Stoutland.
Now, Bucky Brooks, who I trust from NFL.com, now I can't pronounce this dude's name, but I seen him play at Boston College. He could really play that defensive end.
I got you. Donovan Ezeraku.
Yeah, every time I saw him play, he popped. And Boston College wasn't great, but that dude can really play. He had 16 and a half sacks, and apparently
20 and a half tackles for loss, 6'2", 250, really long arms.
And they loved him at the Senior Bowl.
Really long arms and athletic, so he kind of has a J-Lux Hunt type of build in the length and the athleticism.
But more polished.
And way more polished.
So would you like that at 32 if he's there?
Definitely. That's actually the player that I find myself thinking is the most realistic at the moment, given the Eagles' emphasis on fortifying the trenches, and they do have a lot of interest in him as well.
All right, so that one. And now here's the last scenario. So everybody should read, you just heard Andrew's reaction. You should read Dave Zangaro's on NBC Sports, Philadelphia.com, where he reacts to each one of these just like you did. People should go read that.
That was Tyrone and myself from Monday on Best Show Ever, and you can hear me there. I'm joining Tyrone and Silvana tomorrow from 2 to 6, filling in for Ricky Batalico, of course, and I can't wait to get into our conversation. I think we might get into some Dallas Goedert. That's kind of what we were talking a little bit about, but always enjoy my time on the show, and I have so much fun working with those guys. But I'm going to get to my third-round pick, which I do believe is going to surprise some folks, but it might intrigue some as well. This is the Birds Insider Draft Special on 97.5, The Fanatic, and YouTube.
Fanatic Sports Update.
I'm Austin Jones, and this is your Fanatic Sports Update. There's been a bunch of noise about the tush push at the league meetings. Owner Jeffrey Lurie spoke with the media yesterday about the tush push, and he felt a very specific way about the play if it were being banned.
If this is proven to be less safe for the players, we will be against the tush push. But until that's the case, to me, there'd be no reason to ban this play.
Show Jeffrey the stats. Now, the 76ers have announced that Joel Embiid will undergo arthroscopic surgery on his left knee next week. Embiid has been limited to 19 games. The surgery is set to alleviate the left knee pain that Embiid's been dealing with all season. The Sixers are off tonight, and they'll return to the court tomorrow versus the Bucks at home. You can listen to that game here on 97.5 The Fanatic as tip-off is set for 7 o'clock. The Flyers remain off, and they'll return on Saturday. They will face the Montreal Canadiens. Puck drop set for 7 p.m. and you can listen to the game on our sister station 93.3 WMMR. Also on Saturday, the Union will face Orlando City. The game is set to start at 7:30, and you can listen to the game on WWDB. I'm Austin Jones on the home of the 76ers and Flyers, 97.5 The Fanatic, 97.5thefanatic.com.
Andrew DiCecco here. Have you until 10 o'clock. This is the Birds Insider Draft Special. Having some fun here. Talking all things draft related. I'm taking everyone through my latest mock draft, which is not available anywhere else other than right here, right now. So to back up a second before I get to my third round pick, this is the part of the draft cycle that I most look forward to, and that is the Pro Day cycle. And I was talking a little bit about this with my producer Austin Jones, and I'm pretty much it's kind of sad that all the pro days are pretty much over. But to kind of take folks behind the curtain and what a pro day really is, because you hear that term thrown around a lot, but I'm not just going to assume that everybody knows what that is. Every school holds one. If it's a smaller school, they may join it, join with another one. A program that's relatively close by, but everybody gets an opportunity. And this is really the biggest job audition for a lot of these players. And the reality is that not all of these players have the opportunity to compete at the NFL Scouting Combine. They're not afforded that opportunity. And so Pro Days give them that final showcase before the NFL Draft. And what I enjoy most about Pro Days is that I get to talk to people. And that's really what I like to do, is gather information. That's really the name of the game here at this stage of the draft cycle. You're talking to scouts. You're talking to other writers. You're talking to prospects. You get to interview them after the workout. You get to request who you want to talk to. And last Friday, I was at the University of Maryland's Pro Day in College Park. And I have to give a shout-out to the Assistant Athletic Director, Dustin Simanovic, who did a tremendous job answering any questions that we had, finding answers to questions that we had so that we can do our jobs better. And it was just very efficient, and I have to give him a mention there. But I just think that with Maryland, they have so many pro-caliber players that there's always a lot of eyes on these guys. You never know who you're going to see. And there's a player that I'm going to mention coming up that I thought for certain that Eagles defensive line coach Clint Hurt would be there. Turns out he wasn't, but the Eagles did have 2 representatives there. There were 55 scouts, 11 coaches that were there. So a really good turnout. And Maryland typically yields a good turnout. But it's really interesting to see how everybody approaches these pro days, these job auditions, because you'll often see, the big names, but there's always a player that comes out of relative obscurity that maybe isn't on my radar that should be, but they produce a really strong workout, and all of a sudden you're trying to find out more about them. All of a sudden I'm flagging down the Assistant Athletic Director, Dustin, and I'm like, can we interview him? I want to talk to him. So I'll mention him in a second, but I do want to mention you got to try Rita's new Skittles Ice and Skittles Pop topping here for a limited time. Introducing Rita's new Skittles Ice. Try it in a gelati, which I did on Saturday, or ice blender, and add Rita's new Skittles Pop topping for extra fun. Definitely do that. You won't be disappointed. But the third round pick that I have at number 96 is Jordan Phillips from the University of Maryland. 6'2", 320 pounds, defensive tackle. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Milton Williams, the way that I watch him play. He plays with violence, really heavy hands, an interior force, and probably better equipped to be a number 2 than, let's say, a Moro Ojomo. And you still have Jordan Davis, who can be a complementary piece, be that space-eating run defensive tackle. Every player would have a role. And for Jordan Phillips, and I know there's another Jordan Phillips, he plays for Buffalo. There's 2 players with the same name, go figure. But he played in 3 games with Tennessee in 2022. And in 2024, he had 29 tackles, 6 for loss. If you want to watch a game that I think best encapsulates what he's all about, turn on the Iowa game from last season where Jordan Phillips had 9 tackles. Physical and strong. And don't quote me on this. He might be the youngest player in the draft. I think he's a redshirt sophomore, if I'm not mistaken. But I remember when he had his media availability and he stood around and a very mature player. He, how's everybody doing? Nobody answered. So I spoke up, I'm doing well. And we initiated the conversation, and we had like a back and forth in terms of questioning. But I came away very impressed with his mentality, with his makeup for being such a young player. And interestingly enough, when I asked him about any NFL defensive lineman that he models his game after, he mentioned Jalen Carter, which is a typical one, I imagine, because he's such a dominant force and a top 3 defensive player in the NFL. But he also mentioned Jordan Davis. And so I stopped him, and I said, well, Jordan Davis, what do you like about him? I cover the Philadelphia Eagles. And he said his athleticism for being that size, but also the twitchiness that he has and his power. And for Jalen Carter, he mentioned how powerful his club move is and how he's able to get from B to A and A to B, and his athleticism and how he watched him because he knew he was from Orlando, Florida. And when he was in high school, that's the player that he was modeling his game after. That's the player that he was watching and looking up to. And he also mentioned Javon Hargrave as well. And he went on a long answer as to what he liked from Javon Hargrave's game and how he compares and what he took from his game. And so you get 2 players that are on the Eagles and one who was on the Eagles. So he does fit that type. And when you watch him move and you watch him go through these drills and you see the power and his answer, he gave such a great answer when he was talking about his approach about going against an offensive lineman. And he goes, whoever's in front of me, they're going to get dominated. It doesn't matter who it is. They're not winning. And he said it. He didn't smile. He was serious. When you have a young player that has that business-like mentality, that physical nature in which they play the game with controlled violence, that to me is a player who I think is going to make an immediate impact at the NFL level. So keep an eye on Jordan Phillips. But real quick, I do want to remind everyone you're listening to WPEN and WPEN HD1 Burlington, Philadelphia, a Beasley Media Group station broadcasting live from the Comcast Business Studio, powering possibilities. Jordan Phillips, write that name down. And right in the 3rd round is kind of right where I have him slotted. And I do believe that he would be a suitable option and someone who I think can be a contributor as a rookie at that position despite his youth. Austin, what would you like to see the Eagles do at pick number 96?
I do like that pick of Jordan Phillips that you got there. Now I will be transitioning to the offensive side of the ball. I'm looking at the tight end from Miami, Elijah Arroyo. He seemed to have put together a pretty good season down there in Miami, and figure that it is since, the mid-round area of the NFL draft. That's why I would target the tight end position if they go with what I said earlier and take a defensive end outside linebacker with the 1st-round pick. He's 6'4", about 250. Just reading the review about him, he had a willingness to be a move blocker and a point of attack blocker, that's music to my ears because, as you know, it's hard for tight ends to just come in and be a strong blocker right away. And if you're going to be a blocker in the NFL, you have to do it willingly. You can't just be out there and only block when you want to, or you're going to just be put on your behind left and right. They said that he struggles with a little bit of his route running, but that's perfectly fine because I know 2 A receivers that he can learn some routes from if, they were to move on from Goddard and not have him redshirt. So I'm looking at Mr. Elijah Arroyo from Miami.
Like the pick, and that's really the latest the Eagles can afford to go without taking a tight end, in my opinion, because they need someone who can be an immediate, or at least somebody that can be a viable replacement or a successor for Dallas Goedert, because it doesn't feel like it's if. It feels very much like when the Eagles are going to move off Goddard. So I like Elijah Arroyo, the player, athletic player, a little bit more raw. I don't even want to say raw. He's not quite as polished as the Mason Taylors of the world or even a Terrence Ferguson, but I do like his upside quite a bit, and I think he may even go slightly higher. Still a 3rd-round prospect, to be clear, but I think there might be a team that you see, the Hurricanes and the way that he moves, and they might become enamored with that. But I really do like that fit if the Eagles do make that the option. I don't think you can go wrong either way, but I think that for as much as I prioritize and I've really harped on the fact that the Eagles need to add a defensive tackle, and the reason why, because there is such a void, there is a snap share vacancy, a significant one, that Milt Williams left behind, that I think that someone like a Jordan Phillips would be good there. And kind of like tight end, Austin, that's another But defensive tackle is a position that I don't think the Eagles can afford to wait past the third round because they need a player they can count on to help them this year.
Yes, I agree. I mean, the matter of the fact is, Jalen Carter is probably going to play a million snaps because he's just an absolute animal out in the field. But even for him, it's probably not the best to keep having him out there 100% of the time. You should probably have some more depth in there to try to give him a breather so he's not going to just wear down, because they played a lot of football this past season, and you can't expect him to play that high percent of the snaps again. And like we alluded to on the offensive side with the tight end, I mean, if you remove Goddard from the lineup right now, it's just a question mark. You don't know what you're going to get out of Grant Calcaterra, and you don't know what Harrison Bryant might provide, or your buddy EJ Smith. EJ Jenkins. EJ Smith, Philadelphia Inquirer. Sorry. But EJ Jenkins, you don't know what you're going to have there. So those are two pivotal positions that they have to lock down. I feel that within the first 3 picks that they have.
Excellent point. So to recap, I have the Eagles drafting Mason Taylor, the tight end out of LSU, at 32. In the second round at pick 64, I have them taking Andrew Makuba, the safety from Texas. And then in the third round at pick number 96, defensive tackle Jordan Phillips, a powerful interior mauler from the University of Maryland, who I got a chance to see up close and personal. And there's a lot of teams that have interest in him. So that's another player that should fit right within that range. There are the Eagles' first 3 picks. We're going to continue to move through this mock draft as we have 4. Well, we have the 4th round pick, and we also have some 5th round picks, quite a few to get through as well. And I'm also going to tell you about a couple of young players that are now positioned for an elevated role with the Eagles that I'm really interested to see how they handle it. All that and more coming up here on 97.5 The Fanatic.
Mike Missanelli.
You have a stagnant situation right now.
The Fanatic. Andrew DiCecco here. I'm taking you up till 10 o'clock. This is the Birds Insider Draft Special. Having some fun talking all things Eagles related, especially with the NFL Draft. Outlining a lot of the needs and walking everyone through my latest mock draft and outlining some different players that I think would be really good fits for the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I was just reminded of this, but Nick Emenwari was a player that Tyrone and I talked about on Monday when I filled in for Ricky on the Best Show Ever. But he's going to be a first-round player. But I believe that if you're looking at a first-round safety, that Malachi Starks would be the best fit of the two, because Emenwari, he had a remarkable NFL combine. It's 6'3", 220, so he has that Cam Chancellor type of build. Ran a 4.3, jumped the 40-inch vertical. Just an explosive athlete. But I'm not so sure that he fits within the structure of Vic Fangio's defense like maybe a Starks or an Andrew Makuba or even a Xavier Watts from Notre Dame would. But an interesting player nonetheless. Another team's going to get a big-time talent. I'm just not so sure that he would fit Vic Fangio's defense, where you have to be a little bit more rangy and versatile, and he has that hybrid linebacker build. So I think, given what the Eagles already have on the roster with Reed Blankenship and Sidney Brown and their skill set being more along the box safety mold, it's kind of hard to envision Emenwari fitting. I think someone like a back-end rangy type of guy and a back-end communicator like Andrew Makuba would be a really good fit. But in the fourth round, I pick 134. I finally have the Eagles taking an edge rusher, and that is Central Arkansas's David Walker. Now, David Walker could go late 3, but I kind of have him pegged as a fourth rounder. 6'1", 260. So he has that Brandon Graham type of build, sort of a stubby, stocky type, 77.5-inch wingspan. Ran a 4.69 40. A Brandon Graham build, as I mentioned, but he's really good at converting speed to power. He has solid lateral agility, which is very important for that position, and he's good at pivoting. So he has very natural movement. He's not stiff. He also, at that size, and this is very important, he plays with a very good understanding of how to use leverage to his advantage. The downside, though, is that he's 25 years old. He's not necessarily explosive or twitched up, which you tend to like from that position. And the Eagles have Nolan Smith and Jalen Hunt, who very much fit that mold. But David Walker doesn't have that. But he was highly productive. Last season, 68 tackles, 10.5 sacks, and 4 forced fumbles. At that stage of the draft, especially when we ran through all the different names that the Eagles have, and Nolan Smith, Jalen Hunt, Azeez Ojulari, Josh Uche, Bryce Huff. If you get a guy like a David Walker in the fourth round, you kind of allow them time to grow and develop without having to expedite the process. Although at 25 years old, I'm not necessarily sure that you want a year of development, because that's a little long in the tooth. But that's the world that we live in the college football world today. But I think that's a really interesting player. And I kind of alluded to this earlier, but I'm the same type of guy that I love preseason football. And the reason why I love preseason football is because I get to see young players that I watched in the draft, players that I talked about. And you get to see how they fare. And they're going against comparable talent, so it's kind of hard to really gauge where they're at in terms of their growth or just their overall pro makeup. But I just kind of like seeing how they perform at the NFL level, because not everybody performs as we expect, as we all know. But for players like, and I'm going to name 2 off the bat that we don't talk about a lot, but I'm really looking forward to seeing. Will Shipley, the running back who the Eagles drafted in the fourth round out of Clemson. Didn't have a ton of carries last year. He was a special teams force. He had that forced fumble right before the half in the NFC title game, which Will said was his favorite play of the season. Mind you, he scored his first NFL touchdown in that game, So that tells you the selfless nature and how he fixates on whatever his role is. But very good with ball security, explosive, good in short area, and catches the football well. Now, pass protection is going to be key, but after a year of more or less operating in the shadows, I want to see what he's able to do with his second year with Jamal Singleton, the Eagles running backs coach. He is very tight with Saquon. They locker next to each other. He lockered right between Kenny Gainwell and Saquon Barkley. So that wealth of knowledge, I think, is going to serve Will well. And he takes his job very seriously, and he's going to attack the offseason, as I'm sure he is already. Then the other player, this one is a little bit off the beaten path, but that's Eli Ricks, the corner who the Eagles kept on the roster last year. Despite all the different tinkering that they had to do and all the different maneuvering, they found a way to keep Eli around, potentially for a moment just like this, where he is cost-effective depth, who's very young. If you waive someone like an Eli Ricks, who has that pedigree, who played 300 snaps as an undrafted rookie, can play nickel or the outside, though the outside is his natural position, a player like that's going to get claimed. And the position that he plays, that's going to happen. Edge rusher, offensive line, corner, those are positions of value. But Eli didn't play a lot last year after playing, as I said, 300 snaps as an undrafted rookie. So there's going to be an opportunity here because there's a ton of snaps that are now available in the absence of Slay, and Isaiah Rodgers is no longer there. Avonte Maddox, let's not forget, is no longer there as well. This happens to be, by the way, a really good draft for nickel players. It's very deep, and that just might be on my docket here as we work through this. But Eli is a long player. He has the good length at 6'2". Yeah, he's a lanky frame. But you talk about the pedigree. Later in training camp, he had a quiet camp, and then later in camp, he had an interception, and he really parlayed a strong summer finish to the summer into a roster spot. The Eagles really seem to like him. That was a good get by Howie Roseman, and he's been really developing. And I'm curious to see, after a season of really not playing much, I think he was only active for 7 games, to see what he's able to do now, where he has more of an opportunity, a realistic opportunity, to carve out a complimentary role. I think best case scenario for Eli is that Isaiah Rodgers role, where you're the immediate backup on the outside. But again, cost-effective depth, and I want to see what a year of really learning and settling in and getting his footing, what that does for him in training camp. But next, I'm going to work through the plethora of fifth-round picks that the Eagles have, and I want to get Austin's thoughts on what young players he's most looking forward to seeing. You're listening to the Birds Insider Draft Special on 97.5 The Fanatic and the 97.5 The Fanatic YouTube channel.
Fanatic Sports Update.
I'm Austin Jones, and this is your Fanatic Sports Update. There's been a bunch of noise about the tush push being banned. Eagle Jeffrey Lurie spoke yesterday about the tush push and gave his feelings towards it being potentially banned.
If this is proven to be less safe for the players, we will be against the tush push. But until that's the case, to me, there'd be no reason to ban this play.
Show Jeffrey the stats. Now, the 76ers have announced that Joel Embiid will undergo arthroscopic surgery on his left knee next week. Embiid's been limited to 19 games this season due to the reoccurring knee injury. The Sixers are off tonight and will return to the court tomorrow versus the Bucks at home. You can listen to that game here on 97.5 The Fanatic as tip-off is set for 7 o'clock. And the Flyers remain off, and they'll return on Saturday where they will face the Canadiens. Puck drop is for 7 p.m., and you can listen to the game on our sister station, 93.3 WMMR. Also on Saturday, don't forget the Union will face Orlando City. The game is set to start at 7:30, and you can listen to the game on WWDB. I'm Austin Jones on the home of the 76ers and Flyers, 97.5 The Fanatic and 97.5thefanatic.com.
97.5 The Fanatic, the Birds Insider Draft Special. Andrew DiCecco here. I have you until 10 o'clock tonight. Having some fun here on a Wednesday evening, talking a lot of Eagles and NFL draft and answering pretty much a lot of different questions about some of the vacancies and how the Eagles may go about filling that. And look, we ran through the draft picks, and right now we are in the 5th round, which the Eagles have quite a few picks. But to kind of recap here, I drafted tight end Mason Taylor at pick 32 for the Eagles. At pick 64 in the 2nd round, safety Andrew Makuba. In the 3rd round at 96, I have been going with a defensive tackle by the name of Jordan Phillips from the University of Maryland, who I saw firsthand last week. Reminds me a lot of Milton Williams, by the way. And in the 4th round, I have been going edge with Central Arkansas's David Walker. And in the 5th round, at pick 161, which they've got courtesy of the Houston Texans, I have them going offensive tackle Jalen Travis from Iowa State. Nick Sirianni and Iowa State head coach Matt Campbell share a close relationship, so the Eagles should know just about everything that's relevant about Travis, and he's 6'7", 340 pounds, started 11 games at left tackle for the Cyclones last year. Get him enrolled at Stoughton University and let him grow and develop, so by the time that the torch needs to be passed, when Lane Johnson moves on, whenever that may be, Jalen Travis is ready. But again, there's familiarity there. The Eagles have shown interest in Jalen Travis, and that's right around where I have him slotted to go. He was also a Senior Bowl participant, so you have to like the fact that he got recognized like that. So he's not this gem, not this sleeper that people don't know about. He's very much on the radar across the nation. But I like that he plays with savviness. You like his footwork for his size. He's very nimble. But he needs to keep getting stronger. For as big as he is, I think that he could stand to get a little bit, develop some more physicality there. And again, the luxury of joining the Philadelphia Eagles would be that he doesn't have to play right away. And I kind of view him as, well, he could be a swing tackle, but I really view him as a right tackle for the future. But Jalen Travis at pick 161, so there's your offensive lineman. You can kind of check that one off. And then I have him going with another offensive lineman at 164 with center Jonah Monheim from USC. I've been pretty consistent with that pick because the Eagles don't have a backup center. When the Eagles needed a backup center, it was Landon Dickerson, who had to move from left guard all the way to center, or just kick over. But the fact of the matter is that you're now asking another player who's maybe ill-equipped. Maybe this time it's a Trevor Keegan if Tyler Steen starts, or maybe it's a Kenyon Green that now has to fill in for Landon Dickerson. I just don't think that is I don't think that's sustainable for the future. They had Nick Gates on the roster last year, who was a guard/center. He's no longer on the team. He was released after the parade. And really, he was inactive for most of the season. So the point remains that the Eagles need to add a true backup center. They tried it last year in the draft. It didn't quite work out with Dylan McMahon, very undersized player. So I think if they try to go back to the well and find a player this time who is better equipped to hold that role. And 6'4", 302, so again, still a little bit undersized, a little bit on the leaner side, but he does fit that Jeff Stoutland mold. He has the high football IQ, which you obviously love from a center, but he has that versatility. And he's very technical. Being a backup behind Cam Jurgens, I think would really serve him well and get him in this system with this coaching staff. I think that is the recipe for success, and he could be a long-term reserve for the Eagles. And I really love his versatility. So there you have it. Back-to-back offensive lineman at 161, Jalen Travis from Iowa State, the offensive tackle. And then going center, Jonah Monheim from USC, 6'4", 302. It's kind of, the Eagles are eventually going to go offensive line. So I think that's where they probably do it, and that's the way that the board fell. When I was looking at it, those were the best players available, and they also happen to fit positions of need. But I want to tell everybody about the Fanatic signing bonus cash contest. 97.5 The Fanatic and Live Casino and Hotel Philadelphia present the Fanatic signing bonus. Your shot to win $1,000 5 times a day. Weekdays beginning this Monday, April 7th. Listen at 8 a.m., 10 a.m., 12 noon, 3 p.m., and 5 p.m. Each time we'll announce a keyword. You have until 25 minutes after the hour to enter it. There are 3 ways to do so. On the contest page at 975thefanatic.com, via the Fanatic app on your mobile device, or text it to the special short code 45911. One winner gets $1,000. Sponsored by Live Casino and Hotel Philadelphia. Contest rules at 975thefanatic.com. And one more time, I want to talk about our good friends at Rita's Water Ice. Try Rita's new Skittles Ice and Skittles Pop topping here for a limited time. Trust me on this, it's phenomenal. Introducing Rita's new Skittle Ice. Try it in a gelati or ice blender and add Rita's new Skittles Pop topping for extra fun. Again, thanks to the fine folks at Rita's Water Ice. They brought it over here last week when I was filling in for Ricky on the best show ever. Meet Tyrone, Silvana, Austin, who's producing for us, doing a great job. He also got some. He had the Sour Patch Kids one. You're not going to regret it. And this is the time of year where the weather starts to get nicer, and you got to go to Rita's. They've never let me down. They always deliver, and this was no exception. The Skittles Water Ice was tremendous. So do yourself a favor, and you'll thank me later. Trust me. But, Austin, I do want to get from you 2 players that you believe that are young on the Eagles that are expected to have elevated roles next season. And as I was saying mine, I thought about it, and I'm like, I just named 2 players, and Will Shipley and Eli Ricks, that were my rookie diary candidates in back-to-back seasons. But we also know that I've mentioned a lot about Jalix Hunt and how I believe that he's going to take a big step forward. And Tyler Steen's another player that I mentioned as well. But, yeah, players that we don't talk about enough, Will Shipley and Eli Ricks would be my picks. What do you got?
Yeah, so I'll start with the defensive side since we're running through the mock draft yet. I haven't heard you take a linebacker yet, so that's where exactly we're going to go. And we're going to go to JTJ, Jeremiah Trotter Jr., just because you had mentioned him earlier that it seems to be that he's starting to bulk up a little bit. Seems like he's starting to prepare for that starting role. Not necessarily that it's going to be handed to him, but when you look at that depth at linebacker, okay, all-pro linebacker Zach Bond, that's clear cut. You know who that is. But then you go to the number 2 spot due to the Nakobe Dean injury and Oren Burks going on to Cincinnati. There's a little bit of a question mark, so I am going to be excited to see how Axeman Jr. decides to take this offseason and, hopefully implement that into more playing time for this upcoming year.
It's a great pick. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is going to have every opportunity to carve out a pretty substantial role here, and I would expect him to seize the opportunity. He doesn't lack for football intelligence, and a lot of what he's able to do, a lot of what he really thrives in is inherent. You can't really teach that. The instincts, the ability to read and react. He just needs to get stronger.
Right.
I think that he'll do that, but he was undersized last year, and I do believe that he'll add some more size into his frame, and it's not going to be an issue. But in the 5th round, at pick 165, Austin,
okay,
I have the Commanders go. It's via the Commanders. I have them going with cornerback Justin Wally from Minnesota. So the Commanders give the Eagles a gift, and the Eagles get a gift in Justin Wally, who is at 5'10", 190, an exceptional player at the nickel position, runs a 4.4. This is a player that, when I look at Callahan, the nickel corner that that Vic Fangio had with Chicago, the grittiness, the toughness. He was undersized, but he played with physicality. He wasn't afraid to come up and run support, which you have to do as a nickel player. This is the quintessential Vic Fangio nickel defender, and I know that they already have Cooper DeJean there, and it sounds like Nick Sirianni wants to keep him there, but they also lost Avonte Maddox, so you lost your safety net there as a backup, and I think someone like a Justin Wally, who played over about 360 special team snaps in his career at Minnesota, but he's a wrap-up tackler. He plays a lot bigger than his frame, sees the football, he reads the eyes of quarterbacks, and he has plus ball skills. So you wrap all that in the one, and I think the Eagles would have a tremendous addition there in the 5th round. The one knock on him, yeah, he's a little bit undersized at 5'10", 190, but he's got the long speed, he's got the short area quickness, and he can do it all. So I think that would be a really good value at pick 165, which, again, the Eagles have that pick courtesy of the Washington Commanders. He's 7 picks in his Gophers career. 1 he returned for a touchdown last year, 10 pass breakups and a sack to go along with 2 interceptions last season, and as I said, over 350 special team snaps in his career. Another player who you might want to consider if you're the Eagles in the 5th round in terms of defensive back, another Maryland Terrapin, defensive back Dante Trader, who's 5'11", 200 pounds. He can play nickel. He can play safety. He kind of reminds me of a Baltimore Ravens type of player. Very heady. Worked through a lot of adversity throughout the pre-draft process. He talked about that at Maryland's Pro Day. Good ball skills. Again, highly intelligent player. And he kind of fits the mold of the jack of all trades. He got a lot of NFL love at Pro Day and at the NFL Combine as well. So that's a player that they might want to consider. But, yeah, I mean, we're going to wrap things up in terms of the mock draft coming up here soon. Austin mentioned a position that just might be next on the list. I'm going to tell you all about it. You're listening to the Birds Insider NFL Draft Special on 97.5 The Fanatic and the 97.5 The Fanatic YouTube channel.
Tyrone Johnson.
How he so far?
7-5 The Fanatic. This is the Birds Insider Draft Special. Andrew DiCecco here. I have you until the top of the hour. Having some fun here on a Wednesday evening. Welcomed back by the Spinners. I'll be around. Love that song. But we've been talking a lot about the different possibilities and scenarios and where the Eagles are lightest and what positions they should prioritize. And we kind of ran through a lot of the different players who are going to be counted on to take on a increased workload. And so I've been trying to make sense of how they're going to prioritize it. And in my opinion, defensive tackle needs to be at the top of the list. But the way that I had the draft board falling at 32, I had the Eagles taking LSU tight end Mason Taylor. And then the second round at pick 64, that was safety Andrew Makuba from the University of Texas. In the third round at 96, I had the Eagles going with Jordan Phillips, the defensive tackle from the University of Maryland. In the fourth round, that was David Walker, the edge rusher from Central Arkansas. In the fifth round, I had them going with Jalen Travis, offensive tackle from Iowa State. Then I had them going with Jonah Monheim at 164, and he's a center from USC. And then at 165, I had them going with Justin Wally, the corner from Minnesota. He's a nickel player, 5'10", 190, 4.4 speed. But at 168, rounding things out, I have the Eagles going with linebacker Teddy Buchanan from Cal. Teddy Buchanan at 6'2", 233 was a first-team All-ACC linebacker last season. Ran a 4.6, 40-inch vertical. There's a little bit of a player profile for you. Spent the first 4 seasons at UC Davis before transferring to Cal. Listen, this is the player that the Eagles have some interest in. It's my understanding that they had a Zoom meeting. He already had a Zoom meeting with the Eagles, and they met with him at an All-Star game, possibly even at the Combine. I have to check my notes there. But, yeah, they need linebackers. They need to add depth there. We talked about losing Oren Burks. We talked about the injury to Nakobe Dean. We talked about Ben Van Sumeren transitioning to the fullback role. It's got to come from somewhere. You have to have bodies. We know that the Eagles probably won't reach too high for a linebacker, but Buchanan's a very interesting player. Last season, listen to this, 69 tackles, 12 for loss, 5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and 7 quarterback hits. Yeah, that sounds like a Vic Fangio linebacker to me. Someone who can really get after it and rush the quarterback. He does have some range to him. I think you see that the twitchiness really jumps out. If you have a chance, watch some of his highlights. Watch a game if you have the opportunity, because very fun player. Does not stop. His motor does not stop. He's all over the field. Twitchiness, fluid movement, the sideline-to-sideline range. I think he covers a ton of ground and would give you a coverage option at that position. But realistically, he's going to be a special teams maven. He's going to be running down the field and making plays, kind of like Van Sumeren will and has. That's probably his role as a rookie, but I think that he has developmental traits to be a situational rusher. I think he can be a situational coverage player, and he plays like his hair's on fire. A very fun watch. Teddy Buchanan from Cal. I would like to see him get better at processing and have better instincts, but that comes with time. That comes with reps. You get him in the Eagles' defensive system. You put him with linebackers coach Bobby King, and none of that will matter because they'll work that out. They'll have his skill set refined, and they need to add a linebacker. So they check off pretty much every box, and none of the picks that I mentioned, in my opinion, and in the opinion of many, are deemed reaches. Talk to enough people, you get a sense for a lot of where a lot of these players are going to fall or should fall on draft boards. And the one to me that may raise some eyebrows is Mason Taylor at 32, because I know that you see a lot of mock drafts out there and they have him in the second round. Well, the reality is the NFL is very high on Mason Taylor from the intel that I received. He has pro pro-level traits that and when I say that, that's obvious, but the point is he can be an immediate contributor, somebody that you can plug and play. I likened his skill set to Zach Ertz, and I don't believe that he was used in a way that really accentuated what he does well. And for his receiving prowess, yeah, that's exceptional. His ability to find the soft spots in zone, create yards after the catch, based on his ability to pull away from defenders, I think is really interesting. Would be an interesting addition to an Eagles offense that is so multifaceted that they're already positioned to have the NFL's top defense already. But it would really help Jalen Hurts to get a mid-range option that can run routes, that has the sure hands, and can break away and shake a tackle. He leaves a little bit to be desired as a blocker, but I don't think that tells the whole story. I think he has qualities that suggest that he can develop in that area. But here's some numbers on Mason Taylor. Pass snaps per game in 2024, 38.5. Pass blocking snaps per game in 2024, 7.75. Run blocking grade in 2024 per Pro Football Focus, 57.7. Drop passes in 2024, 1. Career drop passes, 7. Career drop passes percentage, 5.1%. 37 career games started. And he averaged 71.8 snaps per game last season. I really do believe that, his numbers weren't all that they could be because there's only one football. And guys like Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland, they didn't have that same situation. They weren't playing in an offense that had Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas and Aaron Anderson and Kyron Lacey. And context is very important when you're assessing a prospect, especially one that has that kind of ability but maybe doesn't have as much production as you were expecting, as someone else of his talent would suggest. But I think he is tailor-made for the Eagles offense and would be, he would be any quarterback's best friend, but that would be a really good fit. And it would still allow the Eagles to pick up a safety in the second round, per se, maybe like an Andrew Makuba, and still get your defensive tackle in the third round, at least in my scenario, Jordan Phillips. So I like the way that board kind of transpired, and I could seriously envision the draft going that way. But I also wouldn't rule out the fact, and we played some audio from Nick Sirianni talking about Kelee Ringo. I don't know that you can rule out the Eagles drafting a cornerback at the back end of that first round if they're still adopting that best player available approach, which all signs suggest that they are. The Eagles have completely crushed it the last 4 drafts under Howie Roseman with that approach, leaving no stone unturned. So corners, if they look to go that route, Maxwell Harrison from Kentucky, 5'11", 185, run a 4.2 at the NFL Scouting Combine, super fluid mover, reads the eyes of quarterbacks exceptionally well. There's an inherent football IQ and an ability to anticipate throws and break on the football that, like I said, are just inherent. The other corner that I mentioned was Siobhan Revel from East Carolina, who I have slotted as a late day 1 pick, worst case top of the day 2, but I kind of have the Eagles and the Chiefs as potential fits for Siobhan Revel. If you want to find out about his game, definitely try to find out his highlights because he is a big-time playmaker. Don't let the school fool you, East Carolina. You may question the level of competition, but they did the same thing about Quinyon Mitchell last year at Toledo. Some did. The tape doesn't lie. Don't always go by what numbers tell you. Sometimes you have to go by the eye test. It's okay to form your own opinion. It's okay to go off of what the tape shows you. Don't necessarily go by percentages, this, that, and the third. That's not how I operate. That's not how scouts necessarily operate. That's not how Vic Fangio operates. He's gone as far as to say that. So while we start to wind things down here, this is always a fun part of the draft process for me, and I always get asked this question because there's always a lot of day 3 sleepers that nobody really talks about or that maybe aren't necessarily as much of a household name as they should be. So I'll run down just a handful of some of the sleepers that I'm really high on for different reasons. Running back LaQuint Allen from Syracuse, 6 foot, 204, back-to-back 1,000-plus rushing seasons. I kind of view him as a third-down running back at the pro level, but I really like what he can bring to an NFL offense potentially. He's somebody that kind of gets overshadowed based on some of the other running backs. Kyle Monangai from Rutgers is another player. And I mentioned this to Tyrone earlier, and Dylan McKinnon and I have talked about this. I think that he is a 3-down running back. He's compactly built. He's kind of like a Maurice Jones-Drew type of player. Completely dominated the competition at Rutgers. That's another player. How about this for an edge rusher? Antoine Powell-Ryland, 6'3", 258 pounds from Virginia Tech. 16 sacks last season, 48 pressures, explosive. 19 tackles for loss, in addition to the 16 sacks. He's not exactly long for that position. He's compactly built, and I wouldn't necessarily classify him as overly explosive. But the production is off the charts, and he should be talked about more than he is. Another player I like a lot, and we've been talking a lot about safeties today, is Craig Woodson from Cal. 6 foot, 200 pounds, 4.4 speed, third team All-ACC, 70 tackles, 2 interceptions, 7 pass breakups. I like his athleticism, his ranginess, his short area quickness. The one knock on Craig Woodson is that sometimes he can get out-muscled. Bigger receivers can kind of out-physical him for the football, and you would like to see him be a little bit more competitive at the catch point, I think is really fair. But that's another guy. I think that he can eventually become a starting safety while starting out as an immediate reserve and a special teams contributor. Craig Woodson from Cal. Definitely look at his highlight tapes if you get the opportunity. This one's way off the beaten path here, but I think you'll find this interesting. Lan Larison from UC Davis. This is somebody 5'11", 215. He can be plugged in anywhere. He can return kicks. He can catch the football. He can run. He's at his best running downhill, but a highly productive player. 3,634 rushing yards in his career, 41 touchdowns, 121 receptions, 1,626 receiving yards, and 10 touchdowns. So you're getting a multifaceted weapon and someone who's probably best suited to be a third-down running back. But you don't often hear about UC Davis, and that's why I felt the need to tell you all about him. But that's going to do it for this edition, this fun draft special, this Birds Insider draft special on 97.5 The Fanatic. But I do really quickly want to thank a lot of folks who made this happen, especially on the back end. They don't necessarily always get the recognition. Dylan McKinnon, Rachel Pitts, Nate Tennyson, who's been back there running the YouTube feed today. Great job, man. Mike Vito, and, of course, our great program director, Scott Mastower. Appreciate everything you do for us. You can catch me tomorrow. I'll be on Kincade and Salciunas, joining those guys in studio for the 8 o'clock hour. Can't wait to catch up with them. And then I'll be coming back for more from 2 to 6 with Silvana Kelleher and Tyrone Johnson on the best show ever. I can't wait for that. Everyone have a great night. Talk to everybody tomorrow.